Rivera pulled off his bloody gloves and looked at Vincent with an expression that mixed exhaustion with something like respect. She's got a fighter's heart. Another 20 minutes and she would have been gone. But she'll live. Now what the hell do we do with her? The Texas sun beat down on Interstate 10 at 3 in the afternoon, making the asphalt shimmer with heat waves that distorted everything beyond 50 yards. Vincent Moretti's black Mercedes glided along the empty stretch of highway between San Antonio and Houston when he saw the crumpled police cruiser in the median, its front end wrapped around a concrete barrier like paper folded by careless hands. Smoke rose from the hood in lazy spirals. The driver's side door hung open at an unnatural angle, and sprawled half out of the vehicle, her body twisted in a way that made Vincent's stomach clench despite 20 years of seeing violence in forms most people couldn't imagine, was a woman in a police uniform. Blood soaked through her shirt from somewhere Vincent couldn't see. Her face was pale against the dark asphalt. One hand reached toward the road as if she'd been trying to crawl for help before her strength gave out. Vincent's driver, Marcus, had already started to accelerate past the wreck, because that's what you did when you were transporting the head of the Moretti crime family and you saw a crashed police car. You kept driving, you didn't stop. You especially didn't stop when the GPS showed you were 40 miles from the nearest town and the police scanner in the dashboard was silent, suggesting this cop hadn't called for backup yet. But Vincent heard himself say 3 words that surprised even him. Stop the car. If that opening grabbed you by the throat, if you're already feeling the weight of the impossible choice about to unfold, then you understand why you need to hit that like button right now. Share this story with anyone who believes that humanity can emerge from the most unlikely places, that redemption isn't about erasing the past, but about choosing who you become in the moments that define you. Subscribe to Acts of Depth because we tell the stories about the spaces between black and white, about the choices that reveal character, about the truth that people are never just one thing, no matter what their titles or reputations say. Now let me take you back to understand exactly who Vincent Moretti was, who the dying cop turned out to be, and why what happened on that highway would shake the foundations of both the criminal underworld and the police force that had been hunting him for 2 decades. Vincent Moretti had inherited his father's criminal empire at 28 when Angelo Moretti died of a heart attack in the middle of a steak dinner at his favorite Italian restaurant in Houston. The transition had been brutal. 3 rival families had seen Vincent's age and relative inexperience as weakness, had tried to carve up Angelo's territory like a Thanksgiving turkey. Vincent had spent his first 2 years as boss proving that youth didn't mean softness, that his business degree from Rice University made him more dangerous than his father's old-school brutality ever had. He'd restructured the organization, cut loose the violent, unpredictable soldiers his father had kept around out of loyalty, and built a criminal enterprise that looked more like a Fortune 500 company than a traditional mob family. Money laundering through legitimate real estate, drug distribution networks that moved product with the efficiency of Amazon Prime, protection rackets that operated so smoothly most business owners didn't even realize they were paying extortion. Vincent had rules. No drugs sold to kids, no human trafficking, no unnecessary violence. He wasn't trying to be a good person, just a smart businessman who understood that bodies attracted police attention, and police attention was bad for profit margins. For 20 years, he'd walked the line between ruthless and reckless, building wealth that would have made his father proud while avoiding the mistakes that had put so many of Angelo's contemporaries in federal prison. The police knew what Vincent was. They'd investigated him 17 times. They'd gotten close to indictments twice. But Vincent's lawyers were better than their prosecutors, and his operation was cleaner than the cops wanted to admit. So Vincent Moretti remained free, wealthy, and by most definitions of success, winning at a game most people didn't even know they were playing. The woman bleeding out on the highway was Detective Sarah Chen, though Vincent didn't know her name yet. What he knew as Marcus pulled the Mercedes onto the shoulder and Vincent climbed out into the oppressive Texas heat was that she was young, maybe early 30s, and she was dying fast. The blood pooling beneath her came from a gunshot wound in her abdomen, and from the amount already soaking into the asphalt, she'd been here at least 20 minutes. Vincent knelt beside her, his $1,000 suit pants pressing into gravel and glass, and pressed his hand against the wound. She jerked at his touch, her eyes flying open, brown and sharp, even clouded with pain. "Don't move," Vincent said, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "You're hurt. Help is coming." It was a lie. Help wasn't coming unless Vincent called for it, and calling 911 would create complications he didn't need. Sarah's hand grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. "You're not a cop," she managed. Her voice was steady despite the blood bubbling at the corner of her mouth. "What are you?" Vincent met her eyes and made a calculation. She was a cop dying on a highway, and he was a criminal with outstanding warrants in 3 states. Every second he stayed here increased his risk. But something in her gaze, some quality of defiance, even in the face of death, made him answer honestly. "I'm someone who's going to get you to a hospital. Marcus, call Dr. Rivera. Tell him we're 15 minutes out, and I'm bringing him a patient with a GSW to the abdomen." Marcus hesitated for half a second, and Vincent saw the calculation his driver was making. Dr. Rivera was on the Moretti payroll, a former Army surgeon who'd lost his license for drug theft but had kept his skills. He treated Vincent's people when going to a hospital would generate police reports and questions. Bringing him a cop was insanity. "Boss, we should—" "Now, Marcus." Vincent's tone left no room for argument. He looked back at Sarah. "What happened here?" Sarah's grip on his wrist tightened. "Ambush. 2 cars. Forced me off the road. One of them shot me through the window. They took my backup gun and radio. Left me to die." Her breathing was getting shallower. "You need to call it in. Tell them Chen is down. Tell them about the 2 cars. Vincent shook his head. "I'm going to do something better. I'm going to make sure you don't die. Then you can tell them yourself." He looked at Marcus. "Help me get her to the car." They moved Sarah as carefully as they could, but she still made a sound like all the air was being forced from her lungs. Vincent kept pressure on the wound, his hands sticky with blood that was too warm and too bright red. Marcus drove like he was running from the apocalypse, the Mercedes eating up highway miles while Vincent held a dying cop in the back seat and thought about all the ways this decision could destroy everything he'd built. Sarah drifted in and out of consciousness. During one of her lucid moments, she looked at Vincent with eyes that had regained some of their sharpness. "I know who you are, Vincent Moretti. I've seen your file." Vincent nodded. "Then you know I should have left you on that highway. Bad optics, saving a cop when I've spent 20 years avoiding them." A ghost of a smile crossed her pale lips. "Terrible optics. Why didn't you?" Vincent thought about his father, who would have driven past without a second glance. Thought about his mother, who'd been a nurse before she married Angelo, and who'd taught Vincent that life was sacred even when the world tried to convince you it was cheap. "Because leaving you there would have made me the man everyone thinks I am. And I'm trying to be someone slightly better than that, even if the margin is thin." Dr. Rivera's clinic was in a converted warehouse in an industrial part of Houston that asked no questions and saw no evil. Vincent had used the facility dozens of times over the years, patching up soldiers who'd been shot or stabbed in disputes that couldn't involve police. Rivera took one look at Sarah and the color drained from his face. "That's a cop, Vincent. That's a badge on her belt. You brought me a cop?" Vincent laid Sarah on the examination table Rivera kept in the back room. "She's a person with a bullet in her abdomen. Can you save her or not?" Rivera was already pulling on gloves, his professional instincts overriding his survival ones. "A lot of blood. I'll need to operate and she needs a transfusion. What's her blood type?" Vincent looked at Sarah's badge and uniform shirt where her name tag read Chen. Her eyes were closed, but she was still breathing. "How would I know that?" Rivera started cutting away Sarah's shirt. "Then we're guessing." "Oh, negative. Marcus, there's blood in the refrigerator. Get me 4 units. Vincent, you're going to assist whether you like it or not." For the next 3 hours, Vincent Moretti did something he'd never done before in his criminal career. He helped save a life instead of taking one or ordering one taken. Rivera talked him through holding retractors and passing instruments while he extracted the bullet and repaired the damage it had done to Sarah's intestines. The warehouse filled with the smell of blood and antiseptic. Sarah crashed twice, her heart stopping, and both times Rivera shocked her back with a defibrillator that looked older than Vincent's car. But she lived. When it was over and Sarah was stabilized with an IV in her arm and bandages wrapped around her torso, Vincent sat in a chair beside Sarah's makeshift hospital bed and thought about the question. The smart play was to call the police anonymously, tell them where to find her, and disappear before they arrived. Create distance, maintain deniability, protect the operation. But looking at Sarah's pale face, at the rise and fall of her chest that he'd helped preserve, Vincent found he couldn't quite make himself walk away yet. We wait for her to wake up, then we let her decide. Marcus stepped into the room. Boss, this is a mistake. Every hour she's here is an hour the police are looking for her. When they find her, they'll have questions about who saved her and where she's been. This ends with you in handcuffs. Vincent knew Marcus was right, but he also knew that some decisions couldn't be made based purely on logic and self-preservation. Then get me burner phones and prepaid cards. If I'm going down for this, I'm going down having made a choice I can live with. Sarah woke up 6 hours later as evening was settling into the warehouse through the high windows. Her eyes opened slowly, taking in the IV line and the bandages, and Vincent sitting in the chair beside her bed reading a book. You're still here, she said. Her voice was rough but stronger than it had been on the highway. I am. Vincent set down his book. How do you feel? Like I got shot and had surgery in a warehouse. Sarah tried to sit up and winced. Where am I? Somewhere safe. Dr. Rivera says you'll make a full recovery if you don't do anything stupid, like trying to stand up too soon. Vincent poured water into a paper cup and held it so she could drink. What do you remember? Sarah's eyes cleared as memory returned. The ambush. 2 cars. They knew where I'd be and when. They forced me off the road and one of them shot me. Professional hit. She looked at Vincent. Why would someone want to kill a detective badly enough to set up an ambush on a highway? Vincent had been thinking about that same question for 6 hours. What were you working on? Sarah's hand moved instinctively toward where her service weapon should have been, found nothing, and relaxed back onto the bed. I can't tell you that. You're Vincent Moretti, head of organized crime in Houston. I've spent 2 years building a case against your money laundering operations. Vincent nodded. I know. Detective Sarah Chen, Organized Crime Task Force. I've read your arrest reports. You're good at your thorough, by the book, which makes me wonder why someone would want you dead badly enough to risk an ambush in broad daylight on a public highway. He leaned forward. Unless you were getting close to something that scared someone worse than prison. Sarah studied him with eyes that were regaining their sharpness. You think this was internal? Someone in the department? I think professional hits don't happen to random cops. They happen to cops who have become problems. And I think whoever set this up assumed you'd die before anyone found you on that empty stretch of highway. They didn't account for a criminal with a conscience happening to drive by. Vincent stood and walked to the window. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stay here until you're strong enough to leave. Then I'm going to give you a phone and money and a way to contact people you trust. And you're going to figure out who tried to kill you before they try again. Sarah's expression was complicated. Why are you helping me? I'm a cop. You're a criminal. This doesn't make sense. Vincent turned back to face her. My mother was a nurse. She taught me that some things matter more than what side of the law you're on. You were dying. I had the means to help. So I did. Don't read too much into it. The next 3 days were strange for everyone involved. Vincent stayed at the warehouse, conducting business through burner phones and encrypted messages, while Sarah recovered on a cot in the back room. They talked carefully at first, 2 people on opposite sides of a line trying to figure out the rules for a situation neither had trained for. Sarah told him about growing up in San Francisco, daughter of immigrants who'd worked 3 jobs to put her through college. About choosing police work because she'd seen what crime did to communities and wanted to be part of the solution. About the 2 years she'd spent building a case against the Moretti organization and how frustrating it had been to watch Vincent stay just barely on the legal side of every line she tried to draw. Vincent told her about his father's empire, about the choice between walking away and taking over, about the rules he'd made to try to run a criminal enterprise with something resembling ethics, about the tightrope walk between effective and brutal, between rich and incarcerated. They didn't become friends exactly, but they developed something like mutual respect. That acknowledgement between worthy opponents that the fight might be fair even if the stakes were unfair. On the third day, when Sarah was strong enough to sit up without wincing, Vincent brought her a laptop. "I've been thinking about your ambush. 2 professional cars, precise timing, knowledge of your route. That's not random crime. That's planned execution. So I did some digging through police scanner traffic and incident reports from that day." He opened the laptop to show her a map. "Your route was from San Antonio to Houston, but according to official records, you were supposed to be in Houston that whole day for a meeting with the district attorney. Someone changed your schedule and made sure the change was logged in the system, creating a paper trail that put you exactly where the ambush happened." Sarah's expression went cold. "Someone with access to internal scheduling. Someone who knew I was working a case that day." Vincent nodded. "I have a friend who's good with computers. Not legal, but effective. He pulled your case files from the department server. In the week before your ambush, you logged evidence in a case involving police corruption. Specifically, you were investigating officers taking payoffs from," he paused, "from a rival crime family, the Castellano organization." The name hung between them like smoke. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. "The Castellanos are in bed with dirty cops. And when I got close to proving it, those same dirty cops set me up to be killed." Vincent closed the laptop. "That's what the evidence suggests. Your ambush wasn't random. It was a hit ordered by corrupt police to protect a criminal organization. Which means if you go back to your department now, before you know who you can trust, you'll be walking back into the same trap that almost killed you." Sarah struggled to her feet, swaying but staying upright through pure determination. "I have to go back. I have to expose this. Those officers need to face justice." "They will," Vincent said. "But not if you're dead. You need to be smart about this, strategic. You need evidence that can't be ignored or suppressed by the people who want you dead." He held out a USB drive. "My computer guy pulled everything from the department server. Case files, internal communications, financial records that someone didn't encrypt as well as they thought. It's all here, including communication between 3 police officers and the Castellano family about your investigation." Sarah took the USB drive with hands that trembled slightly. "Why are you doing this? Helping me take down corrupt cops benefits you. It hurts a rival family. This serves your interests." Vincent met her eyes. "Maybe it does. Or maybe I'm tired of living in a world where the people who are supposed to enforce the law are more corrupt than the criminals they're supposed to catch. Maybe I think if police officers are going to be bought, they should at least have the decency to stay bought by me instead of the Castellanos." A ghost of a smile crossed Sarah's face. "That's the most Vincent Moretti answer I've ever heard." "I'm a work in progress," Vincent said. Sarah left the warehouse 4 days after Vincent had pulled her off that highway. She left with a burner phone, $5,000 in cash, the USB drive full of evidence, and instructions to contact only people she knew with absolute certainty were clean. Vincent watched her go and felt the weight of the choice he'd made. The reality that saving a cop's life would have consequences he couldn't fully predict. Marcus drove them back to Vincent's legitimate business office, a gleaming tower in downtown Houston where the Moretti organization maintained its legal face. "You know this changes things," Marcus said. "You saved a cop who's been investigating you. Even if she's grateful now, eventually she'll remember she's law enforcement and you're a criminal. This will come back to hurt you." Vincent looked out at the Houston skyline, at the city his father had conquered through violence and he'd maintained through calculated restraint. "Probably, but I'd rather be hurt by doing the right thing than live with having done the wrong thing. That's a new philosophy for me. We'll see how long it lasts." 3 days later, Sarah Chen held a press conference that made national news. Standing beside the FBI director and the Texas Attorney General, she outlined a corruption case involving 3 Houston police officers, 2 sergeants and 1 lieutenant, who'd been taking payoffs from the Castellano crime family in exchange for protection and information about ongoing investigations. She presented evidence from the USB drive Vincent had given her, evidence that was corroborated by FBI investigation and testimony from informants who'd finally felt safe enough to come forward. She described her ambush in clinical terms, Noting that her attackers had known her route and timing, information that could only have come from inside the department. And she called for a full federal investigation into police corruption in Houston, a call that was answered within hours by the Justice Department. The arrests happened fast. The three officers were taken into custody along with four members of the Castellano organization. The case dominated headlines for weeks. Sarah became the face of police reform, the officer who'd nearly died exposing corruption and had survived to see justice served. She gave interviews about the importance of accountability and the danger of officers who valued money over duty. And in every interview, when asked how she'd survived the ambush and gathered her evidence, she gave the same carefully rehearsed answer. I was found by a good Samaritan who chose to help instead of walking away. That person's identity isn't relevant to this case. What's relevant is that corruption was exposed and criminals in badges are facing justice. The reporters pressed for details. Sarah deflected. The investigation tried to trace her movements during those missing days. She maintained she'd been in hiding, gathering evidence, recovering from her wounds. The truth stayed buried because both Sarah and Vincent understood that some truths would create more problems than they solved. But 6 months after the press conference, on a Saturday afternoon when Vincent was having lunch at a small Italian restaurant he owned in a quiet Houston neighborhood, Sarah Chen walked in wearing jeans and a jacket that concealed her service weapon. She sat down across from him without being invited. "Detective Chen," Vincent said, "this is unexpected." "I'm not here as a detective," Sarah said. "I'm here as someone settling a debt. You saved my life. You gave me the evidence that took down dirty cops and damaged a rival crime family. And you never asked for anything in return." Vincent sipped his espresso. "I'm not asking now either." "I know." Sarah pulled an envelope from her jacket and placed it on the table. "I've been promoted to head the Organized Crime Task Force. First official act was reviewing all ongoing investigations. I found the one targeting your organization. 2 years of work. Good evidence. Solid case." She tapped at the envelope. "I'm closing it. Insufficient evidence to prosecute. We're moving on to other targets." Vincent picked up the envelope but didn't open it. "You're giving me a pass because I saved your life." "I'm making a choice about resource allocation," Sarah corrected. "There are worse criminals than you in Houston. The Castellanos, the drug cartels, human traffickers. I'm focusing our attention where it matters most. If that benefits you, that's incidental." She stood to leave, then paused. "But Vincent, understand this. I'm giving you this once. One pass. If you cross certain lines, if your organization starts dealing in things that hurt people, the way drugs and trafficking hurt people, I'll come for you with everything I have. This debt works one time." Vincent nodded. "Understood. I'll try to stay on the acceptable side of terrible." Sarah almost smiled. "That's all any of us can do." She walked out of the restaurant and back into her life as a decorated detective fighting the good fight. Vincent sat with his espresso and the envelope that represented 2 years of investigation closed and filed away. He thought about choices and consequences, about the strange path that had led from a highway discovery to a Mexican standoff of mutual debt. That evening, Vincent called a meeting with his top lieutenants. They gathered in the conference room of his legitimate real estate company, 6 men who'd been with him for years and understood how the organization worked. "We're making changes," Vincent announced. "Effective immediately, we're pulling out of any operations that involve distribution in schools or neighborhoods with primarily families. We're increasing our investment in legitimate businesses and decreasing our reliance on activities that generate police attention. And we're implementing a policy, no targeting of law enforcement, ever, for any reason." The lieutenants exchanged glances. One of them, a man named Tony who'd been with Angelo Moretti, spoke up. "Boss, that's leaving money on the table. Those school territories are profitable, and police are targets when they get too close to operations." "Police are complications that cost more than they're worth," Vincent corrected. "And I've recently been reminded that some lines shouldn't be crossed regardless of profit potential. We're a criminal organization. I'm not pretending we're anything else. But we're going to be the kind of criminal organization that my mother wouldn't have been completely ashamed of. That's the new standard." He looked around the table. Anyone who can't live with that can leave with a severance package, and my recommendation that they find new employment. Anyone who stays understands the rules have changed. No one left. Vincent hadn't expected they would. Loyalty in his organization was built on respect more than fear, and respect came from leadership that made difficult choices and stood by them. 3 years later, Vincent Moretti sat in that same Italian restaurant reading a newspaper article about Detective Sarah Chen's promotion to captain and her continued work fighting organized crime in Houston. Her task force had taken down 2 major drug cartels and was being held up as a model for other cities. There was no mention in the article of a highway ambush or the criminal who'd saved her life. That story stayed buried, known only to the few people who'd been present and who understood that some truths were better left in the shadows. Vincent's own organization had evolved. The legitimate businesses he'd invested in had grown profitable enough that the criminal operations were becoming almost unnecessary. Money laundering was harder when most of your money came from actual legal sources. Protection rackets seemed pointless when your commercial real estate holdings generated more revenue with less risk. Vincent was becoming, slowly and against his own expectations, almost legitimate. He'd never be clean. The past didn't erase itself, but the future had possibility in it that he hadn't seen before a dying cop on a highway had forced him to make a choice about what kind of man he wanted to be. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. He opened it to find a single sentence. There's a community center in 5th Ward that needs funding. They help at-risk kids. Thought you might be interested. SC. Vincent looked at the message and smiled. Sarah Chen was still fighting crime, but she'd apparently decided that fighting crime included turning criminals into something resembling productive citizens when the opportunity presented itself. He texted back, "How much do they need?" Her response came immediately, 50,000. Can you handle that? Consider it done, but I get to be anonymous donor. Wouldn't want it any other way. Stay on the acceptable side of terrible, Moretti. You too, Captain Chen. Vincent made the donation the next day through one of his front companies, a commercial real estate firm that did enough legitimate business that 50,000 to a community center looked like normal corporate philanthropy. The money went to after-school programs and job training for teenagers who were at risk of being recruited by gangs like the ones Vincent's organization had competed with for years. It was strange using money he'd made through criminal enterprise to prevent the next generation from making his choices. But it felt right in a way that most of what Vincent did never had. His mother would have approved. That thought mattered more than Vincent had expected it to. Over the next 5 years, the pattern repeated. Sarah would text about organizations that needed funding. Vincent would make anonymous donations. Community centers, youth programs, addiction recovery services, a scholarship fund for children of police officers killed in the line of duty, which Sarah had suggested with what Vincent suspected was deliberate irony. They never met again in person, never spoke on phones that could be traced, but they maintained this strange partnership, the cop fighting crime and the criminal funding prevention programs that made crime less attractive to desperate people looking for options. Vincent's organization continued to shrink as his legitimate interest grew. The illegal operations that remained were smaller and cleaner. No violence, no drugs sold to kids, no human costs that exceeded the profit margins. He wasn't a good man, but he was becoming a less bad one, which was its own kind of progress. Marcus retired after 30 years of service, replaced by a younger driver who'd never known the old days when the Moretti organization ruled through fear.